Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching.
Alice woke up to the insistent ringing of the doorbell. She got out of bed as if she had been electrocuted. She hastily searched for her key and opened the door. Carlos walked into the apartment, sat down on the poof in the hallway, and stretched out his legs without looking at Alice. Alice sat down in front of him and took off his shoes. "You have your own keys, don't you? Why don't you use them?" Alice muttered under her breath. Carlos left the question unanswered, thinking it was just another woman's stupidity. "Are you going to have dinner?" Alice asked. "What dinner? Don't you use a watch?" Carlos mumbled. Indeed, Alice looked at the clock. It showed 4:30 in the morning. Carlos got up from the ottoman and took slow steps toward the bedroom. When Alice arrived, he had already snored. In a few minutes, the room was already wrapped in the smell of alcoholic booze. Alice couldn't sleep anymore. She sat by the window until morning. In the morning, she woke up her daughter Elizabeth and took her to school. When she returned, Carlos was already awake and going to work. "Do you want breakfast?" Alice asked ingratiatingly. "Have I ever had breakfast at home?" Carlos pretended as if he had never actually had breakfast in this house. "Better run to the store and buy something cold. I'm thirsty. Although how many times have I asked you to buy some in advance and put it in the fridge?" Apparently, this was an impossible task. Carlos continued to resent him. Alice was glad that she had the good fortune to run to get a cold drink for her beloved husband. She went to the store, and in a few minutes Carlos was enjoying a cold cocktail. "How are things at work?" Alice asked. "Nothing. I've been swamped with urgent tasks again. Not a minute of peace for at least the rest of the month," Carlos said. He finished his cocktail, picked up his jacket, and went to work. After a while, Alice dialed his phone number. "Carlos, I didn't want to disturb you this morning, but I think we should talk sometime, just the two of us. We have a lot to talk about. Please find an opportunity," she said to her husband. "How many times do you have to tell me I'm swamped with work? If you want to talk, say it right away," Carlos said. "Talking about our relationship is not a 2-minute conversation on the phone. I don't think we're going to agree on anything," Alice said. "Until you learn to iron shirts properly, forget the relationship. No self-respecting man will talk about relationships if his shirt is not properly ironed." Carlos shouted into the phone and ended the conversation. Now Alice was overcome with guilt. She ran to the bedroom, opened the closet, and started looking at all of Carlos' shirts. The shirts were all clean, perfectly ironed, and smelled fresh. She couldn't figure out which unironed shirt she was talking about. It didn't even occur to her that an unironed shirt was just an excuse to brush off any conversation. Instead, Alice puzzled over those words all day. Evening came. Alice picked Elizabeth up from school, made dinner and 2 salads, then did homework with her daughter and put her to bed. It turned out that Elizabeth had eaten at school, and Alice hopelessly waited to see if maybe, just maybe, Carlos would show up on time and they would finally have a family dinner for the first time in months, maybe even years. As the clock struck midnight, she realized the futility of her expectations. She was preparing to face another restless night of staring at her phone and waiting for at least a call from Carlos. This pattern has been going on for a long time. Carlos says he is forced to work day and night, but at night, none of his coworkers have been seen working. All of Alice's attempts to talk came across as cold indifference. Alice walked into the bedroom. In front of the mirror, she saw a framed photograph of herself from 8 years ago. Here she is with a crown on her head. Around her neck is a red ribbon that reads, "Miss 2005. This is just one photo from her many beauty pageant victories. The crowns have long been gathering dust in her closet. In those years when she managed to win one contest after another, the cavaliers followed her in droves. Among them were rich men of respectable age and successful, famous, and promising young guys. Everyone around her was sure that Alice's achievements are provided by one of these men, maybe even several of them. Alice received solid fees, but people around her were sure that this money was a gift from rich suitors. This really hurt Alice, so she promised herself every time that she would build a relationship only for love and only with a simple guy. She wanted to prove to everyone that she is not a frivolous fury, but a normal, serious girl, capable of unconditional love and be a faithful companion. In the end, that's exactly what happened. She and Carlos met by chance. He was in his last year of university and was working part-time as a waiter in a cafe. Handsome brunette with a suspended tongue quickly found the way to the heart of the recognized beauty. Alice idealized their relationship, a beauty queen and a simple, promising guy. Such a union seemed to Alice something fabulously romantic. True, Alice noticed the uneasy character of Carlos, but wrote it all off to the individual characteristics of the man. Friends twirled their fingers at the temple. Some even persistently discouraged the relationship with this insolent young man. But Alice did not listen to anyone. After a while, Carlos said that Alice should leave the modeling business and do something serious. Alice did not resist. Thankfully, she had a good education as a linguist. In the end, she got a good position in an international company. But Carlos wasn't happy with that either. He was always criticizing her work. "Foreigners must be looking at you and drooling. That's why you become so uppity," Carlos reprimanded. Alice was very flattered by this. She thought that if a guy was jealous, he loved her. Sometimes she did notice the extra attention from her management and his partners. Carlos didn't always talk it all out, but he never forgot a single instance. After getting his degree, Carlos got a job at a bank. After that, Alice decided that their relationship needed to be taken to the next level. So, after a couple months, it turned out that Alice was pregnant. Carlos was not thrilled with this news, but also did not actively oppose marriage, so began their joint family life. After the birth of Elizabeth, Carlos quickly moved up the career ladder and became one of the favorites of his boss. Alice had to stay at home for a while. During this period, their relationship changed. Although Carlos was not known for his warm attitude towards his wife before, now he began to openly neglect her. He could go on vacation with friends for a few days without warning or not come home at all for several days in a row. Alice looked to herself for blame. A man goes left when his wife can't give him something, her friends convinced her. Alice couldn't find it and continued to suffer. In the end, several years passed unnoticed, hoping to find what Carlos lacked in his family's relationships. Each day was similar to the previous one. After work, Carlos goes out with friends. Alice cooks dinner and together with her daughter wait for him at home. Carlos comes only in the morning. One day, Alice was overcome by curiosity. She stealthily crept to Carlos's phone and began to study his correspondence. She noticed that he was calling and texting a contact named Olivia the most. Turns out Alice knows this Olivia. She's an aspiring singer. She used to be Alice's competitor in one of the beauty pageants. Unlike Alice, Olivia wasn't neglecting any of her suitors. Carlos became close to her after his management sponsored Olivia's concert. In the process of organizational work, he was able to attract the attention of an aspiring singer and gradually became her best friend. Alice, of course, did not know about it. After studying her husband's cell phone, Alice dialed her friend's number. "Katie, hi. I don't think I have any more questions for Carlos. He's hanging out with Olivia. Maybe you don't remember her. You crossed paths with her at the pageant too. What am I gonna do?" Alice sobbed. "What do you think? What does a decent woman do when she finds out her husband has cheated on her?" Katie didn't know what to say, so she decided to just help her friend talk. "A decent woman, I think, would put all emotions aside and fight for her family," Alice said. "To be honest, it was expected from your Carlos," Kathy said. "Kathy, I don't understand why no one believes in our relationship. Everyone has been skeptical from the beginning. He and I have been together for 9 years and still nothing has changed. Why is that?" "Maybe it is this skepticism that has had a negative effect on Carlos," Alice asked. "My dear, the meaning of love and relationships is that they are built and exist against all odds. Could it be that the people around you were noticing something that you were stubbornly turning a blind eye to?" Katie put Alice in front of deep thought. Alice realized that seeking comfort from a close friend was a futile endeavor. Since she had decided to fight, she would fight. As time went on, Carlos came home in the morning. He even stopped hiding his cell phone and quietly left it on the table. Right after he came home, Olivia could text him to say good night or thank him for his support at the next concert. New Year's Eve was approaching. Alyssa made plans to spend the holiday without Carlos and made up an explanation for her daughter in case she asked why her father didn't stay with her even on a family holiday. A few days before the new year, Carlos announced that this time Alice would go to the corporate party with him. It had never happened before. Alyssa rejoiced. She had a ray of hope that maybe Carlos had finally come to his senses and decided to become a model family man. For the corporate party, she chose a luxurious dress with a deep neckline on the back. She created the image of a European aristocrat at the end of the last century, carefully thinking through every detail. Indeed, this image perfectly suited her facial type. Unfamiliar people might have thought that it is a famous actress in the middle of the shooting process went for a walk outside. Corporate party was held in one of the elite restaurants of the city. Alice came down from heaven to earth when she found out that coming with her other half was a prerequisite for the current corporate party. The staff of the bank had already organized parties in different styles, and when the options ran out, someone suggested holding a party in the traditional style. Therefore, all 250 employees of the bank came with their other halves. Carlos, as the boss's favorite, John, sat at the same table with him. Ariana, the boss's wife, was also in the same company. Ariana was a pretty middle-aged woman. She was like her husband in every way. And John was a solid man in his 60s with a noble gray hair on his head. They say that if a man is lucky in life, then over the years he becomes more attractive and charismatic. This could be said of John. Each of those seated introduced their other halves to the audience. The evening was promising. Champagne poured by the river. Exotic appetizers were served by the mountains. The program provided all kinds of racy spectacles, including male and female striptease. Well, and the remarkable part of the evening was the performance of singer Olivia. This rising star of show business was not distinguished by a unique voice or poetic gift. Her popularity slowly grew. And it's no coincidence if instead of talent, everything is built around connections and money. That's all there is to say about the singer Olivia. When the audience was drunk enough, the most interesting part began. The young people did not leave the dance floor. The rest gathered in small groups and made pathos toasts. As the evening approached its midpoint, the Toastmaster announced the performance of Olivia, a rising pop star. Carlos, who had been sitting next to Alice, jumped out onto the dance floor at that moment and didn't return for the rest of the evening. When Olivia finished singing, Carlos accompanied her backstage. Alice was prepared for this turn of events. As soon as Carlos stepped away from her, she noticed that John didn't take his eyes off her. Ariana noticed this as well. She gave Alice an arrogant look and left to dance with one of the young bank employees. Alice pulled out her cell phone and started flipping through it helplessly to pass the time. She noticed out of the corner of her eye when John got up from the table and walked by her purposely to touch her shoulder with his hand. Alice decided to write it off as an accident. After a while, through the noise of the loud music, there was shouting on the dance floor. Someone ran out of the crowd, grabbed a bottle from the table and hid in the crowd again. After a moment, the whole crowd started to scatter around. "What's a corporate party without a fight?" Someone who was sitting down exclaimed solemnly. When the music was turned off, Alice clearly heard hysterical female screams. She decided to come closer and find out what was going on. In the center of the dance floor, a certain woman is holding tightly by the hair a girl who is sitting on the floor. The people around her seem hesitant to come closer and separate the two women. Someone's shoe is lying not far from this picture. Both women are screaming and interrupting each other. Alice comes closer and hears another male voice speaking in a calmer tone. "Ariana, stop it. What are you making up again?" "Am I making it up?" "No, darling. It's you as usual." "Okay, when I'm back here, you can do whatever you want. But why the hell are you inviting me to your corporate party and groping your slut in front of me?" Alice couldn't believe her ears. The woman who grabbed the girl's hair was Ariana. Standing next to her is her husband, the boss of this whole collective, John. Alyssa became genuinely curious to discern who was between them. She really didn't know this girl, so she directly asked one of the dumbfounded onlookers about it. "What's going on here? Who is this girl who is on the floor? What did she do wrong?" "Oh, that's our Julienne. She's the boss's secretary, and also his mistress for the season. And next to her, I'm sorry, who are you?" It seems that the drunken bank employee came to her senses a little and asked who she was giving all these office secrets to. "My name is Alice. I'm Carlos' wife," Alice said. "So Alice, standing next to her is Ariana, John's spouse." Apparently, she was unaware that John had changed mistresses a month ago. Now it seems she found out, the unfamiliar drunken employee said and hiccuped loudly. Alice walked to her table, picked up her purse, and left the festive restaurant room. Carlos didn't even notice her leaving the event. Alyssa decided to take a walk home. At that moment, she got a call from her friend Kathy. "So tell me, how was the corporate evening with the bankers going?" "It's fine. I've already gone home. Carlos is all over that Olivia girl. I think he's gonna stay with her till morning. And his boss John is breaking up his wife and his mistress in the middle of the room." "All the other 500 guests are watching and filming it on their phones," Alice said. "Wow. Why didn't you stay till the end? A show like that and you didn't bother to watch it." Katie laughed into the phone. "Yeah, nothing surprising there." "Alice, is it okay for you to let your Carlos do that to you too?" Katie asked. "I wouldn't want to go over this for the 100th time. I've already told you and everyone else my position. So far, nothing has changed," said Alice. "I'm sorry, darling, but I think you're either stupid or Maeve. No respectable woman would allow herself to be treated like that. He's out in the open with that singer. You don't say a word. He comes home when he wants, you tolerate it. He goes around her in front of you, you turn away silently. He's just realized you're so soft. He can't get away with it. So he keeps humiliating you," Katie said. "No, Katie, it might look that way from the outside. I love Carlos. The most important thing to me is that he's happy. I knew from the beginning that he was a free spirit. If it makes him happy, then so be it. Forcing him to be faithful won't make him happy," Alice said. "That's your philosophy. It only sounds pretty in words, but in reality, it drains you of energy, makes you a miserable victim. And all for what? You think he'll appreciate it and thank you someday. Don't think I'm prying into your personal affairs. I just want to see you happy too," said Katie. "I have Elizabeth. I have a job I love. All my loved ones are alive and well. I guess What kind of guy?" "Well, from what I can tell, this John is a very complicated man. He probably grew up in a troubled family. He probably had a difficult relationship with his mother. Despite the large number of women in his life, none of them could really hook him. He treats his spouse as a necessary formality. Deep down, he is not satisfied with his accomplishments. He likes to take risks. Perhaps he has already lost his fortune several times and restored it from scratch. That's how I see him," Alice said. "Oh, come on, girl. It's like you've lived a lifetime with this man," said Katie. "To be honest, I'd be interested in talking to this person, but I don't need to," said Alice. "Yeah, you don't need that, because you already have one. Carlos is his name," Katie laughed again. That was the end of their conversation as Alice had already reached home. A couple days after the party, Alice tried to make conversation with Carlos again. He avoided any conversation out of habit. At that moment, Carlos' cell phone rang. As soon as he picked up the phone, a woman's high-pitched tantrum could be clearly heard. Alice was sitting at the table opposite, and in some places she could even hear the conversations in the phone. "Is this why I gave birth to my son and single-handedly put him on his feet? Do you remember how I had to work for 5 years to pay for your university studies? What did you end up doing? If I'd known what an ungrateful son would grow up to be, I wouldn't have suffered so much and lived happily ever after. You can't expect any attention to your mother, no help and support. Mom, don't start early in the morning. Everything's going to be all right," Carlos mumbled. "Of course you'll be fine. What about Mom? Mother's eating crumbs for bread. Where else can she be better off? You're spending all your money on that little hussy with the crown on her head. When you have time to think about your mother. Come on, Mom, why are you like this?" He looked like he had turned into a delinquent schoolboy and kept muttering the tray. His mother did not listen to him and hung up the phone. Alice at first was shocked by such treatment of her mother-in-law with her son, but gradually she got used to it. Then she realized that talking in such tones is the style of communication between mother and son. Alice had never seen her mother-in-law communicating with Carlos as an adult and established man, periodically reprimanding her adult son on any number. "But many of you have been working here for more than 1 or even 2 years. You department heads started here from scratch and have grown to this level over the years. I care about your fate as experienced specialists. Therefore, I entrust the solution of the current problem to you. Each of you will offer your own variant of the solution, but the practical realization of this solution will also be entirely on you. Whoever is able to lead the bank out of this situation, I will appoint in my place, and I myself will take a well-deserved rest, said John. The ambitious branch managers found the offer tempting. Each of them secretly dreamed of taking the highest position in the bank possible. Hearing the announcement from their boss about the prospect of becoming the head of one of the leading banks in the region, everyone in the room became visibly excited. Carlos thought that this was his finest hour, that he had to show himself in the best possible light in this situation and finally become what he was in his heart, a big boss. After this meeting, a whole new life has begun in the bank. The race for power was declared open, and now the strongest must win. Carlos realized that this was his brilliant chance to finally make a name for himself. Carlos once again didn't come home. Alice stayed up all night waiting for him. In the morning, gathering all her strength into a fist, she packed her daughter for school, then began to get ready for work. That's when Carlos called. Alice, hi. Now please don't start right away. Just listen to me and do as I ask you. In our bedroom in my safe, I have a red paper folder with documents. Take it and drop it off at my office, please. It won't be hard for you to do it on the way, okay? Okay, I will, replied Alice to her beloved husband. Strange, her husband used to keep Alice away from his safe. Now he calmly asked her to open it and even poured through the contents. Alice had never seen what Carlos so reverently, at times even nervously guarding. Indeed, the safe revealed many interesting things. First, Alice's gaze fell on a stack of photo albums. They don't keep those nowadays. Apparently, Carlos hadn't found a suitable place for them in the apartment, so he put them in the far corner of the safe. She opened the photo albums and looked at the pictures. Here Carlos is a schoolboy. In another picture, he receives his high school diploma. Here he is surrounded by his classmates. Here he is the only guy among his classmates. Carlos surrounds himself everywhere with a lot of women, and only in such an environment he can feel happy. Alice had guessed that. Today she was convinced of it once again. In the far corner of the safe, she found another folder tied with a string. Alice was genuinely curious. She realized that it was a waste of time to go through her husband's personal belongings. But she knew she wouldn't use anything against him. If something from his past became known, she was certainly not the kind of woman who would reproach him later for it. On the mysterious folder, she saw a small logo, the logo of a laboratory where, among other things, DNA tests were performed. Alice carefully unfolded the folder. Not many papers inside. The most important one was on top. It stated that Carlos and Jessica's genetic similarity was 0%. This meant that Alice's mother-in-law was not her husband's birth mother. This was news to Alice. She didn't hang on to her shock, quickly found the folder she needed, closed the safe door, and headed towards Carlos' office. He turned out to be out of place. Carlos is at the chief's office. They have an urgent meeting. Wait for him here. Julian, the secretary said. Alice sat down in the office foyer and eyed Juliana curiously. She's the boss's new mistress. She's also the one who got the booty from Ariana at the corporate party. Alice was curious if there was any hair left on Juliana's head from that fight, or if the boss's furious wife had pulled it out clean. But Julian was surprisingly calm and poised. Carlos still hadn't left the boss's office. Alice, though in a hurry to get to work, decided to wait for him. She pulled out her cell phone and immersed herself in reading. Every minute someone from the bank came to the foyer, asking if they could come to the boss. When they found out that he was busy, they went back. After a while, Alice's attention was drawn to a familiar loud voice. You haven't been fired yet? Ariana was standing in front of Julian's desk. No, why would I be fired? Julian seemed startled by Ariana's unexpected visit and couldn't hide her consternation. Her eyes rounded, she quickly got up from her seat and looked ingratiatingly at her boss's wife. That's because I gave the okay to keep you on the fetch and serve. You'll know who your benefactor is, understand? Ariana said the last words with a low hiss. Juliana nodded her head silently. And if you'll be a grateful girl and be my friend, you'll have many more new pleasant surprises waiting for you. What do you think of that? Ariana doesn't seem to like wasting words and time. She stated her position right away. What do I have to do? Julian asked with a trembling voice. Don't you want to ask me how you managed to escape my wrath? Ariana asked. Juliana flapped her long eyelashes and didn't know what to answer. Everyone should know that my eyes and ears are everywhere here. Even the walls of this building serve me. Well, my walls whisper to me that you're not the one sending my husband pictures of you in your underwear. It's someone else in this house, the daughter? Ariana smiled. Hello, I'm fine, thank you. I hope you are well, said Alice, and regretted that she could not hide her amusement at the quirks of this woman. Wanda appeared. She was a young girl with long dark hair and big eyes. Wanda, there's someone here to see you, Julian said and nodded toward Ariana. Is that what you are, Wanda? So tell us, teach us how to send pictures of yourself in your underwear to the boss's phone in the middle of a company party. Ariana looked at the young girl with a glare. You? What are you talking about? I don't understand you. Now Wanda rounded her eyes and trembled in front of the boss's wife. Ariana pulled out her iPhone, made a couple of clicks on the screen, and turned the screen directly to Wanda's eyes. I mean this. Is that a picture of you? Alice managed to see the photo from a distance. Indeed, there was a girl with long hair and lingerie in the photo, but no head visible. It's not me, I swear to you. What makes you think it's me? I have a boyfriend and we're serious. I didn't send those pictures to anyone. Wanda was now starting to get angry. Ariana silently walked over to Wanda, grabbed her by the hair and dragged her over to Julian's desk. Listen to me, both of you. I'll be sure to find out who that brave little twerp is, and then she'll definitely be in trouble. And you probably know more than you're telling me right now. So tell this heroine to pray. If she turns out to be one of you, praying won't help. I warned you, Ariana said and let go of Wanda's hair. Both girls looked at the floor in silence. Ariana shook her hands defiantly, sprayed antiseptic on them, and looked toward Alice. You will please forgive me for disturbing you. I have to deal with them in this way, otherwise it's impossible. Good day to you, Alice. Ariana headed towards the elevator. Wanda and Juliana stood like stumbling blocks until she got into the elevator and went out. Yes, Carlos, I'm listening. Hello, darling. I missed you. The day seemed like an eternity. I need to see you and hold you in my arms. Where are you now? Carlos asked. I'm sorry, Dan, you're not in my plans today. I need to be alone. I'll see you tomorrow or some other day, Olivia said, trying to get her insistent friend off her back as quickly as possible. What's wrong? Did I do something to offend you? Or did someone else? Carlos continued to insist. No, it's okay. It's okay to be alone sometimes, especially for someone as creative as me. Please be understanding, Olivia said. But Carlos was deaf to her pleas. He was used to hearing only his own desires. No matter how hard Olivia tried to explain the simple truth that she just needed to spend the evening alone, Carlos continued to give her a real interrogation. He was really quite jealous of Olivia. She's talented, bright, beautiful. She's growing in popularity. She's getting recognized on the street. The press is publishing various rumors about her personality. Carlos clearly wasn't prepared for the peculiarities of his girlfriend's public life. Olivia knew it too. When Olivia realized that talking to Carlos was useless, she simply hung up and turned off her cell phone. A couple hours later, she received a call from the hotel front desk informing her that her personal assistant was tearing into Olivia's room. Olivia was surprised, since she didn't have any personal assistants. But she guessed who it was. Carlos was standing on the doorstep with a small bouquet of fresh flowers. Carlos, you're incorrigible, Olivia said. That's what a real man should be, resourceful and persistent. Don't ask me how I found you. My heart followed in your footsteps, Carlos continued like a mourning nightingale. Olivia wasn't really in the mood to spend the evening with Carlos. She wanted to shoo him away, but he kept insisting that he wanted to stay with her. The more Olivia waved him away, the more insistent he became. I think I know what it is that you can't tell me outright and have been tormenting me for a long time. Carlos pretended as if he discovered something very important. Yes, I realize it's time for us to take our relationship to the next level, but I'm thinking about how to propose to you properly. It should be very romantic and memorable. You should remember it for the rest of your life, Carlos said. What? Carlos, are you even normal? You have a family, you have a wife and a daughter. What kind of proposal are you talking about? Olivia was seriously outraged. I will get a divorce. I'm basically ready to take that step. I think Alice is also ready for it. And with my daughter, I will see her from time to time. I will periodically throw her money, Carlos said. Olivia realized that this crazy guy Carlos actually had far-reaching plans for her. She realized that it was useless to argue with him now that marriage was not in her plans. Carlos has been following Olivia around like a shadow for so many years now, not missing a single night where she's performing, that it really wouldn't be hard for him to get a divorce. Then Olivia decided to come at it from a different angle. Carlos, it's not even about that. Since we're having this conversation, I'm gonna be honest with you. I have really big plans for my future. I'm just realizing a small part of it right now. By the time I get to the halfway point, the whole country will know me. I'll have every man in the country at my feet. You know what you're really like, don't you? Anyone with enough money and power will want my attention. How will you handle it? Let's be honest, you're just a middle manager at a typical bank. How can you fight recognized alpha males and defend your legal right to me? Olivia glared at Carlos. Olivia hoped that talking in this format would hurt Carlos, and he would start to distance himself from her. She could rudely push him away because he'd really done a lot for her. He was the one who convinced the same John to sponsor the filming of her music videos and her performances. A rude rejection would have been ugly on her part, but Olivia wasn't going to build a long-term relationship with Carlos. Carlos had taken today's conversation in his stride. The next day, driving up to the bank office, Carlos thought that Olivia would be delighted if he could fix the bank's current situation and take over the board. He took it as a sign of destiny. Carlos headed straight for John's office. He informed his boss that he had some ideas on how to deal with the current issues of the bank. He asked for copies of some documents, took them, and informed him that he was leaving for the day to deal with these issues. After leaving the bank office, Carlos went to one of the best attorneys in town. After spending about 3 hours with the attorney and getting a detailed consultation, he headed to the top accounting firm in town. He went on to visit several other specialists who are considered the best in their field. By evening, Carlos was sure that he would soon have the top chair in the bank. Indeed, the best specialists in their field began to protect the bank's interests. TV, newspapers, and bloggers were involved for efficiency. The court case received wide publicity. People believed that some group of foreign fraudsters decided to bankrupt the domestic bank and take it into their own hands. Under such pressure from public opinion, the judges had to think twice before deciding on the fate of the bank and then only make a decision. It cost Carlos a lot of money. He went into debt, and even Alice helped him with her savings. In the end, Carlos was close to winning. Elizabeth's birthday was approaching. This year she would be turning 9 years old. Elizabeth remembers all of her recent birthdays. She remembers them because she never had her daddy present. She is old enough now to protest her father's absence. Alice had long thought about how to spend this birthday so that Elizabeth wouldn't be sobbing again the next day. There was no hope for Carlos, of course. He would still spend the day at Olivia's concert somewhere. Alice decided this year to invite Elizabeth's favorite grandmother, Jessica. Her grandmother, like Carlos, had never had much love and affection for Elizabeth, but once a year sitting in a family circle as close friends was a manageable task. So thought Alice. On Elizabeth's birthday, Alice set the table and waited for the guests. Everyone came except Carlos and her grandmother. Elizabeth spent the whole evening asking why Daddy wasn't here and when Grandma would arrive. Alice tried to calm her down by making up different excuses for them. The next day, Alice left Elizabeth at school and went to her mother-in-law's house. Pensioner Jessica spent almost all her time in her apartment. Seeing Alice on her doorstep, she was not particularly happy. But Alice knew how to bribe her mother-in-law. She took 2 large bags of delicacies, fruits, and sweets. "Hello, Jessica. May I come in?" "Oh, it's you." "Well, come in," Jessica said in an indifferent voice. "I couldn't go to Elizabeth's birthday party because I was sick. I'm still sick. My blood pressure is high, my head hurts. My legs are always aching. It's hard to walk," Jessica began to complain. Elizabeth was very upset. "I told you to send a cab to pick you up. or I could drive myself to pick you up. If you're sick, let's go to the doctor. I'll drive you myself. I'll accompany you everywhere. We'll visit the best doctors, get a prescription. I'll buy you all the necessary medicines," said Alice. "No, thank you, no need. The territorial doctor from the polyclinic comes to me. It is enough for me," said the dissatisfied mother-in-law. "Jessica, please tell me that you don't like to come to us. Is it only because of your illness, or is there another reason?" Alice asked. Jessica did not expect such a trick question. "Don't you believe me? And why should I like to come to you? It is you who should go to me. When you get old, you'll understand what it is to go out or stay at home. I personally want to stay at home. That's out of the question." Alice tried for a long time to turn her mother-in-law to a friendly tone of conversation, but she was not very good at it. "I didn't know much about Carlos' childhood. Please tell me about his birth, about his childhood. I'm really interested in all this." Alice finally decided to turn the conversation in the right direction. "What's there to tell? He was born and grew up like all children, but he was very naughty. His father tried to re-educate him many times, but he did not succeed," Jessica said. "And in his disobedience, in whom he was?" Alice asked. "I don't know either. My father was a quiet man, and I wasn't rebellious, only he was the only one. When he was a teenager, he tried to run away from home, and we had to chase after him. I wonder why Carlos doesn't even look like you." Alice finally threw the thread of conversation in the right direction and watched the reaction of her mother-in-law. "It's there too. But I never paid attention to it." Mother-in-law tried to divert the topic of conversation. "Have you always had such a tense relationship with your son?" Alice asked her right in the forehead. "They are not tense. I am a mother. I have the right to instruct him on the right path. I don't have to fawn over him. What makes you think our relationship is strained?" Jessica asked threateningly. "Carlos is an adult. Despite his lack of support, he has achieved a lot on his own. He'll continue to do so. But believe me, it's very important for him to be recognized by you. You're his mother, so you're the most important woman in his life. Your opinion means a lot to him," Alice said. "What do I have to confess to him? I raised him, clothed him, helped him get a higher education. What kind of confession?" Jessica got angry and began to resent him. "The thing is, Jessica, Carlos has known for a long time that you're not his birth mother. He took a DNA test and the results showed that your resemblance to him is 0%. Why are you keeping this from Carlos? Didn't your attitude push him to do it? Why don't you just tell him and talk to him like adults?" Alice said. Jessica dropped the teaspoon she had just used to stir the sugar in her tea. This news was a surprise to her. She had thought this secret would go to the grave with her. But how come now Carlos knew about it? "What the hell are you talking about?" Jessica couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. "If you want, I can show you a copy of that certificate," Alice said. "What's all this digging for? His own parents aren't alive anyway. Why traumatize him now with this revelation?" Jessica was now beginning to slowly give up her resistance. "If you don't want to tell Carlos about this, then let it remain a secret. But the point is, you need to build a relationship with him. Carlos is trying to pretend that everything's fine, but in reality, it's his strained relationship with you that's keeping him from being okay. He can't feel at ease in any setting, in any company. He doesn't feel happy even inside his family with me and Elizabeth. He chases after different women. He thinks that one of them will make him happy, but it's a delusion. He can only find comfort in a warm relationship with you. My marital happiness depends on that too. That's why I decided to talk to you about it," Alice said. "If he's chasing other women, look for reasons in yourself. You nag him all the time too, don't you? He gives everything he earns to you. You roll around like a cheese in butter, but still he feels uncomfortable with you." "I love him like a mother and he loves me," Jessica said. "No, he doesn't. In our whole life together, I've never laid claim to his money. I make a good living myself. Let it be known that the regular grocery deliveries to your house are also done by me. But I'm not talking about money. I was just trying to get you to get along with him. Then Carlos would eventually change. You have to understand me as a woman," Alice said. The grocery delivery was another revelation to Jessica. She didn't want to be honest about the fact that she really did have some hard feelings about Carlos, but she couldn't understand them herself. Now her sister-in-law claims it's all because she's hiding the truth from Carlos. Jessica is very afraid that if Carlos finds out the truth, he might turn away from her. Then she'll be really hurt too. But since he's already taken a DNA test and has never bought everything she's gotten on a regular basis over the years, maybe Carlos feels something too. Alice realized this topic was too heavy for one conversation. She promised her mother-in-law that they would revisit the topic again. She urged her mother-in-law to try to be honest and trust Alice. Lastly, she reminded her that the two women, she and Jessica, loved the same man. They both wish him well. Their views could not in principle diverge. All that remained was for them to be honest with each other about it. After a couple of months of hard work and endless negotiations with different people, the fate of the bank is almost decided. The court ruled in favor of the bank, but there was still some time during which the opponent company could appeal this decision. So everyone waited with bated breath for the appeal period to end. The company that sued the bank repeatedly signaled that it would not agree with the court's decision. But as a result of Carlos' timely negotiations with the right people, they did not appeal the court's decision. In the end, the bank lost some money, but remained viable. The fact that some middle manager Carlos was able to do so much more than a few deputy bosses and other management people displeased John's inner circle. They clearly realized that they had lost the race for power to this Carlos. This was well known to John as well. At a regular meeting, John addressed his subordinates. Thanks to your collective efforts, we have managed to get out of a very difficult crisis situation. As I promised, it's time to determine the winner and hand over the reins of the bank to him. The managers looked at each other. Only Carlos couldn't understand why his boss was devaluing his merit and now saying that it was a team effort. After all, none of his coworkers had any idea how to get out of this situation until 3 months ago. And now all of a sudden they were complicit in Carlos' victory. He barely concealed his outrage. He decided to talk about it alone with his boss. And John continued his presentation. I think Max has good potential as a manager, especially since he has been with us for over 10 years and has proven himself. Also, I would not want to diminish the merits of our CFO, Mickey Andreevich. He has enough experience to continue our business with dignity. Carlos was now genuinely indignant and only silently rubbed his branded pen. In fact, neither Max nor this Mickey had lifted a finger to keep the bank open and viable. On the contrary, as soon as John had reported problems 3 months ago, each of them had been quietly interviewing competitors and preparing themselves to leave their jobs with minimal loss. The meeting ended and everyone went to their offices. When John returned to his office, Carlos was there waiting for him. John, do you really think that Max and Mickey did anything to save our business? Carlos asked. Why don't you think so? John sounded like he was mocking Carlos. I just don't understand the logic of what you're saying. Carlos looked questioningly at his boss. If you want to be a good leader, you're going to have to learn to act illogically too. Remember, without other people, no one gets anywhere in this life. Your success depends on your ability to influence other people and make them question the logic of your actions. John continued to speak in riddles. Carlos didn't quite get the gist of the conversation. He had expected that at today's meeting the boss would announce his decision to appoint Carlos as a supervisor and that he himself would take a well-deserved vacation. He didn't doubt it at all. That's why he went into debt to pay for expensive consultations of the best specialists. And now it turns out that the best candidate for the top job is Max or Mickey. John, you probably don't know that Max and Mickey have been walking around your competitors' offices for a long time and they're looking for high positions. They're only looking out for their own interests. They don't care who they serve and whose interests they protect. They just want to get their usual high salary and that's it. That's all they need, Carlos said. And you, Carlos, what do you want out of life? Don't you have a sacred idea for which you would do anything? John asked. We'd all know you're hopelessly in love with that singer Olivia. You'd do anything for her too, would you? Consider that other people can have their own Olivias too. And it's not always a singer and it's not always a person. Some people have a job, some people have regular money, so I don't see the difference between you, Max, and Mickey. You're a fool, Carlos, and your Alice really is a rare pearl. In fact, your appointment as head of the department has already been finalized. I can't wait to put it in your hands as soon as possible and get some rest. But let's talk man to man. I have a small favor to ask of you, and I understand that this favor is realizable, John said. Carlos can't understand why the usually straightforward and categorical boss is now so shy, as if he were a student in an exam. He decided to let the boss talk things out gradually, since the request was so atypical. Could you talk to Alice so that she could give me some time? John finally suggested. What do you mean? Literally, Carlos. I'm a man and she's an attractive woman. Besides, you don't want to protect her. You've got your own woman to love. So let's be honest. I like your Alice. I noticed her when I first saw her at our corporate event. John, I understand you as a man, but why do I have to be her husband in this? You could go to her directly or ask someone neutral. It would look ridiculous on my part, Carlos said. It's up to you, Carlos. I don't want to go through the hassle of looking for a third party. And I'm not going to look for a third person to approach your Alice. I'm coming to you because it's the shortest way. Moreover, I am favorably disposed to you before I sign the decree appointing you in your place. John once again emphasized that Carlos' career advancement was at stake. Carlos thought for a while and decided that for the sake of the prospect that was literally shining in front of him, it was worth it to take the last step. All the more reason to put him and Alice out of their misery. If Alice agrees to meet with John, Carlos will not have difficulties with the divorce. And after the divorce, he's already free for his Olivia. Besides, he will appear before her no longer as a middle manager, but as a bank director. That's a worthy candidate by Olivia's standards, a true alpha male. After weighing the pros and cons, Carlos decided to go home right after work for the first time in years. He didn't find Alice at home. Elizabeth was sitting alone. When Carlos asked his daughter, she said that her mom was studying in the evenings and had been for a long time. It turned out that Alice had been getting some kind of additional education in the evenings for 2 years. Carlos only found out about it today. He decided to take care of the appropriate setting and prepared dinner with his daughter. He set the table and lit candles. But after a while, he remembered the gist of the conversation, and the candles seemed to Carlos as if they were mocking Alice. He put them out and immediately removed them from the table. Alice never returned. Elizabeth informed her father that her mother was coming in quite late. It was also revealed that Elizabeth does her own homework and prepares her own things for the morning. Carlos remembers her as tiny, still begging for her hands and afraid to sleep alone. And now, unnoticed, his daughter has grown up, it turns out. Explaining it by the need to get up early tomorrow, Elizabeth did not bother with her father for a long time and went to bed. Alice came home close to midnight. "Where do you go so late?" Carlos asked. "Whom am I hearing this from?" Alice tried to echidna laugh. "Seriously, the child sits at home alone, does homework alone, and where does our mom go at this time?" Carlos continued in his usual tedious tone. Finally we realize we have a child. We have a family." "Carlos, what's wrong with you?" "What's wrong?" "I'm worried about you coming home so early. Is it really something serious?" Alice asked. "Don't be sarcastic. I'm in the mood for a serious conversation in a positive way. Isn't that what you want?" "Carlos, what do you want? I know we haven't had a serious conversation in a long time. You're still not gonna tell me where you've been." "Elizabeth told me you've been studying somewhere. Is that such a big secret?" Carlos said. "It's no secret. I'm getting a second degree, a liberal arts degree. That's all. I made dinner. Sit down. I'll take care of you tonight," Carlos said. After Alice sat down at the table, Carlos put a piece of fish with vegetables of his own making in her plate, poured hot tea with herbs, and looked after Alice in every possible way. "There's actually an occasion, a good occasion," Carlos began ranting. "I'm being promoted. John is going on vacation. I'm a potential candidate to take his place." "Wow, congratulations. Why is this Jonah guy giving up his seat?" Alice asked. "He's tired, and he hasn't been feeling well for a long time. He has been saying for a long time that he wants to finally take a rest and put the board in the hands of someone he trusts. Recently, the bank almost went bankrupt. Then he gave us the task of winning the case in court. He promised that whoever could do it would become CEO. I did it. I'm really happy for you," Alice said, standing up from the table and kissing Carlos on the cheeks. Carlos was a little embarrassed, as if he was being kissed by a complete stranger. "Did Jessica know yet?" I think she'll be very happy, said Alice. I don't think there's any point in telling her yet. First of all, I haven't been officially appointed yet. Secondly, my mom never knew how to be happy about my successes, said Carlos. You're right about mom, said Alice, and thought about it. She tried to understand how Carlos managed to hide the truth that his mother was not really his mother. It must be hard to play the native son when his mother had already proven by her attitude that she wasn't, and the DNA test just proved it. Alice, let's be honest. I know you're a wise woman. You'll be able to understand and help me. Trust me, it's best for both of us, Carlos said. Alyssa waited for Carlos to finally talk about divorce. She had been ready to do so for a long time and had never been able to sit down with Carlos at the same table and talk calmly. Now she was glad for the opportunity. It would be painless, especially for Elizabeth. You remember John, don't you? Carlos asked. Yes, vaguely, but I remember his wife Ariana very well. She was a truly amazing woman. Alice smiled, remembering Ariana's jealousy scenes. John says he really liked you. He told me to tell you that my appointment depends on you giving him your attention, Carlos said and covered his eyes with his hand, waiting for Alice's violent reaction. What did he say? Asked Alice. Carlos was surprised at the calm reaction as well. How can I speak for you? I'm only relaying his words to you. I need to communicate your decision in the next 3 days, and that will be the end of my mission, Carlos said. You mean you don't care? Alice asked. Well, don't start, please. You have a lot of foreigners at work who are looking at you. I do not know which of them you disappear with in the evenings, under the guise of evening training. What do you care if it's one more or one less? Carlos changed his tactics and started to get downright rude. I can't understand how I could love such a man and believe that someday you and I would get along and live happily ever after, Alice said quietly, looking out the window. Don't dramatize everything, please. Is it hard for you to spend just one night with John? Keep in mind that he is still a tidbit here. I had a lot of young girls fight over him, and you, my dear, should be happy to have the attention of such a man. Carlos was raising his voice. No, it's not hard for a woman to spend the night with John, a delivery boy or a cab driver. The only question is whether she wants to, Alice said. Well, that's fine. I'll let him know tomorrow, and don't let me down, please. I'll pay attention to your John after you agree to the divorce. Carlos rejoiced to himself. The question of divorce worried him as much as the question of his appointment to the position of head. But he tried not to show it right now. If you insist, then let's do it your way. I'll give my consent, Carlos said. After a tense conversation, Carlos and Alice separated into rooms. During the night, Alice got up, went to Carlos's phone and transferred one of the contacts to her phone. She had already thought out her next move and was confident of her success. A couple days later, Alice's phone rang. The name John popped up on the screen. Alice pretended that she didn't answer strange numbers and didn't pick up the phone. She couldn't possibly know John's phone number, so she had her first excuse. Apparently, Carlos had let her know right away that Alice was okay with it. The calls from John didn't stop, but Alice continued to ignore them. In the evening, on her way back from school, Alice went to a cafe, ordered a nice glass of wine, and started researching all the social media and other information on the internet about this John. When she finished her wine, she had a rough image of John in her head. Now she was ready for action. Pictures on social media showed where John was practicing. A couple days later, Alice went to the same gym and bought a 6-month membership. Alice had no trouble recognizing John's visiting time as well. He came closer to lunchtime. Well, Alice would have to replace lunch breaks with workouts for a while. The supposedly chance meeting with John didn't take long. He was the first to spot Alice as she left the gym. Alyssa, good afternoon. What a joyful meeting. Do you also work out here? Asked John. Hello. Your face is very familiar to me, but I can't remember where we crossed paths. Alice made a surprised face. We met at our corporate party. I'm Carlos' manager, your husband. It saddens me that you didn't recognize me, John said. If you're done training, let me give you a ride. We can even have coffee on the way. John tried not to miss an opportunity. I'll let you give me a ride, but coffee some other time, said Alice. On the way to the office, John continuously showered Alice with compliments. It is noticeable that he has a suspended tongue, and most likely, he believes that every woman loves ears. When we got to Alice's place of work, John put the question to rest. Alice, our pleasant meeting could have taken place much earlier. I called you several times, but you haven't picked up. It's possible I don't answer strange numbers. And what did you want to say if I suddenly picked up the phone? Asked Alice. John was taken aback by this bluntness. Did Carlos say anything to you? He asked. Carlos tells me so many good things about you. I don't even know which one you mean. Of the most recent, he told me that you trusted him with your position. I must say, we are very grateful for that trust. I will make sure that Carlos does not let you down and works hard, said Alice with a sincere smile. And now, with your permission, I will go. With great regret, I will let you go now, but I will be waiting for you here tonight after work, said John. John came to his office. He had one last piece of paperwork to sign and gradually begin the process of transferring his powers into Carlos' hands. Today, he finally signed the decree appointing Carlos. Afterward, he called a meeting and announced his decision. He was confident that his business was now in safe hands, and in addition, the beautiful Alice was almost in his pocket. He had a positive impression from meeting her. He was looking forward to the second meeting to move as quickly as possible to the realization of his main desire. Near the end of Alice's working day, he was already waiting for her outside the office. Alice got into his car and gave him a certain address. We need to hurry up. They are waiting for us there, Alice added. John was glad that he wouldn't have to search for a free hotel room on his own. He was sure that Alice knew his purpose. When they reached the desired address, Alice thanked him and said goodbye. Thank you for taking care of me twice in one day. I'm about to start class. I have to go, and you have a good evening, Alice said and took off. John was left puzzled, as he was expecting something else. He had hoped that Carlos had explained everything himself and that Alice would take him straight to the hotel room. He wrote off Alice's behavior as feminine coquetry. I like it better this way. I'll wait, he thought, and left. The next day, Alice filed for divorce. Without waiting for the court's decision, she found herself a rented apartment, packed her things, explained everything to Elizabeth, and moved in with her daughter. And to Carlos, she wrote briefly, Elizabeth and I will live in a rented apartment for now. When you find another place to live and vacate our apartment, let me know. Elizabeth has a long commute to school. Carlos was inspired by his new position and had no desire to argue with his ex-wife right now. So he quickly vacated the apartment and did not delay in agreeing to the divorce. Already a week later, Alice was a free woman. After receiving the certificate of dissolution of marriage, she was in no hurry to move back in. She called an interior designer and asked to completely remake the apartment, taking into account the wishes of her daughter. While the repair of the apartment was underway, Alice decided to completely transform herself. She visited a stylist and completely changed her image. If before she looked like an obedient girl, now she became a gorgeous young woman. All this time, John did not stop calling her every day and insisted on meeting. Alice postponed the meeting, referring then to business, then to fatigue. The second time she met with him already in a new image. John, who used to behave with women as a master of life, next to Alice trembled like a young man. The contrast between the old and new image of Alice in such a short time made a strong impression on him. Alice still crossed him as if in between. She didn't give John a chance to talk for long. She was quick to leave his company every time. John was even beginning to doubt Alice's favor a little, but on the other hand, she's transformed so quickly. It's all for my sake. She wants me to like her. He preferred to think that way. John was determined today. He bought a nice branded bracelet, bought flowers and a box of chocolates for Alice. He was a little sad that she still hadn't had coffee with him. After many busy days, at least today, she would let him drive her from work to her evening studies. Alice, I'm really glad we met. I thought I'd do you a favor today. This is for you. John says Alice was about to get out of the car. He held out his present and flowers with such a solemn look, as if he was presenting a presidential order. I can't take this, thank you, Alice said. Why, don't you like the bracelet? Let's go together and exchange it for another. We can go right now. John was surprised by such a surprise. No, it's not the bracelet. It's really beautiful. It's just that I'm not comfortable accepting such expensive gifts, said Alice. So what if it is expensive? You deserve only such a thing. It doesn't oblige you to anything. I want to make you happy from the bottom of my heart. Take it. John almost begged. You want to make me feel good. Then don't make me violate my principles. And don't be offended by the gift, please, Alice said and said goodbye. Further attempts were useless. When she got out of the car, John looked after her and talked to himself. My God, to think I'm persuading the woman to accept such an expensive gift. Don't make her violate her principles. And what words? What's the matter with you, John? Pull yourself together. Get this woman into bed quickly and forget the whole thing. But how? How? This woman makes me think of my youth. She makes me feel like an inexperienced young man. Just think about it. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and saw his wide smile. Enjoying his youthful state, of course, John did not even notice that Alice had discreetly filmed some moments of their meeting on her phone. Alyssa dialed Carlos to thank him for quickly resolving all the pressing issues of their divergence. First, she congratulated him on his appointment. Carlos was clearly very pleased. In parting, she asked, "Didn't you change your secretary? Is it the same Julianne?" "Yes, she already knows the ins and outs. Let her work. I'm not going to fire her," Carlos said. "Could you text me her phone number? When I was in your office, we talked briefly, but we didn't have time to exchange contacts." Carlos didn't specify what Alice wanted from Julianne. He hadn't cared about Alice for a long time. Now he had every reason to demonstrate it legally. He hung up the phone and he even felt bad for taking the time to forward Juliana's phone number. He invited Juliana over to his place and said, "Contact this one at this number and tell her you are Juliana, my secretary. You'll figure it out for yourself there." Julian was accustomed not to ask too many questions, so she immediately dialed Alice. "Hello. Carlos asked me to get in touch with you. I'm listening." "That's great, Julian. The thing is, I'm the sister of Wanda, the marketer. She told me that you are well acquainted with John's wife, Ariana Markovna. The thing is, I saw him with a woman the other day. She asked you and Wanda to give her things like that, didn't she?" "Yes, she did." "You talked to her. If she's interested, I can send her something. Then let me know, okay?" "Okay, I'll tell her." Alice was now waiting for Ariana's call. Not to waste time, she dialed John's number and said that she would like to meet him at the bar tonight for a drink and then go to a hotel room of her choice. John was delighted. He put all his business aside and a couple hours later, he was already waiting for Alice at the entrance. She came out to him in one of her new looks, which he hadn't seen yet. Sitting at the bar, he began to talk about his connections and achievements, which he was used to showing off in any public. He is usually listened to in silence and nodded his head. But this Alice was also behaving in an unexpected way. "We once played golf with friends in one of the castles in Britain. The British have always been known for their vanity. How can simple games be turned into rituals? I realize that this is all left over from the aristocracy of the last century, but this is the 21st century. The world loves mobility and practicality. I don't understand why it's so complicated. Do you agree with that?" Alice interrupted John. "Yes, perhaps there is such a thing." John again fell into the state of a student before the exam. "Alice, why are you still on a first-name basis with me? We've known each other for a long time. You can use you." John tried to soften the situation for himself. "No, I think I'll continue to address you as you, because a polite form of address automatically emphasizes personal boundaries between people. And that means it's easier to maintain respect between people. It's not a small thing, is it?" Alice asked. John wondered. Ariana had been bugging him all his life about his disregard for personal boundaries. He wasn't sure if she respected him. He suddenly discovered that it was Alice's polite treatment that kept him from displaying his usual consumerist behavior toward women. That's why she seems so unattainable. Right now, she's declaring that she wants to stay that way. And he doesn't have a single argument to parry against that. Throughout the evening, as soon as he started talking about his possibilities, Alice kept turning the conversation into a philosophical direction. After a while, Alice declared that she was tired. They agreed to go to a hotel. They arrived at the hotel and settled in the room. Alice ordered some water. When the water arrived, she poured herself and John a drink. Then she said she needed to call her daughter. The conversation with her daughter went on for a long time. John sipped his water out of boredom and watched TV, then decided to lie down in bed and relax. When Alice finished talking to her daughter and returned, John was already snoring on the bed. Alice undressed, lay down next to him, and took many spectacular pictures. Then she got dressed, tiptoed out of the room, and hailed herself a cab home. It didn't take long to get a call back from Julianne. She called to say that Ariana herself was willing to meet to find out about her husband's next fling. Alyssa asked for her phone number and thanked Julianne for her help. When Alice was just about to contact Ariana Markovna, she received a call from John. "I understand you've been very tired lately. I'm sorry that yesterday your tiredness was stronger than your passion for me," Alice said. "I'm very embarrassed about that. It doesn't usually happen to me." John started to make excuses like a delinquent teenager. Alice interrupted him again. "I've fallen into a kind of ambivalence. I don't know how to get out of this state. As soon as I can get out of it, I will let you know about it." After these words, Alice said goodbye and hung up the phone. Of course, she didn't tell him that she had put sleeping pills in John's water glass. She leisurely settled down on the couch and began her correspondence with Ariana Markovna. After a polite greeting, Alice sent a video of John trying to give Alice an expensive bracelet. She refused to accept the gift. She then sent photos from the hotel room with the caption, "But I still couldn't resist his pressure." Emotional Ariana completely lost control of her emotions from what she saw. On top of that, she was furious that the evidence was being sent to her not by an outsider, but by her new fling Jonah himself. Jonah was exhausted from his missed chance to spend the night at the hotel with Alice. He was also deeply ashamed of her. In the evening, Ariana had given him another jealousy show. Whereas before he had been pestered for actual cheating, this time he heard a torrent of insults for nothing. He hadn't been able to convince Ariana that things hadn't worked out with Alice. Ariana wasn't going to stop at just figuring things out. The anger she had gotten from Alice's insolence was not going away. John, when he realized that he could only escape from this scandal, went to his country house. For several days, he did not call Alice. He kept waiting for her to call and triumphantly report that she had avenged him in this way. But then he remembered that during the months of his courtship, Alice had never called him. Now she certainly wouldn't call. John talked to himself. "Why am I waiting for her to call at all? I need a distraction," thought John, and invited his friends to his country house. All evening while his friends were having fun, John sat frowning. He tried to keep the conversation going, but he wasn't very good at it. He was terribly annoyed that he had literally become a slave to this cell phone and wished with all his soul that Alice herself would call for once. Strangely enough, Ariana didn't bother him one bit. When people do not love each other, it is very difficult to build a relationship on just one woman's desire. Believe me, I've seen as much as you have. The best thing is when people can find the strength to face the truth. In this situation, let John make his own decision. You're a young, very attractive woman. I don't think you deserve to suffer like this. The two women talked for a long time. Eventually, Ariana confessed that she really hadn't loved her husband for a long time and didn't feel loved. She had thought about divorce many times before, but stopped herself each time. Also, Ariana honestly admitted that indeed many men look at her, so Alice made sure that the way out of the situation was found. Now Ariana is basically ready to talk to her husband and let him go. And for herself, she has learned something important. Now she can be honest with herself. The divorce process of Ariana and John passed without scandal. John announced that he was voluntarily transferring some of his assets to Ariana. The final peace in his soul reigned when he saw Ariana happy with her new chosen one. Alice's words about the need to be honest with herself made Ariana think for a long time. She analyzed all the years of her life together with John and was able to honestly admit to herself that she never felt happy. As far as wealth was concerned, she had already satisfied all her desires, and John had provided her with a fortune that would be enough for the rest of her life. John was in a bad temper for some time. At such times, he sought solace in Alice's company. She no longer rejected him so much, but continued to put him in situations where he had to ask himself many questions and spend days searching for answers. After a while, John announced that he wanted to go to live in the Bahamas. Of course, he was going to take Alice and her daughter with him. Before they left, they got married. John kept trying to find out how Alice felt about Carlos continuing to be the bank manager. Maybe he should be replaced by someone else. Alice didn't ignore the question. Carlos is not a stranger to the organization after all. He grew up there professionally and knows the inner workings of the organization. Let him work. By the way, what's going on with the singer? The singer found someone else. Carlos is enjoying his freedom now, having fun with every skirt he meets. I see. Alice smiled with sadness on her face. It had been years. The sea and sunshine of the Bahamas incredibly transformed the couple. Alice gave birth to a son. Elizabeth entered one of the best universities in Europe. Alice and John spent many happy days together. Sometime after the move, Alice managed to convince John to maintain a friendship with Ariana Markovna. Ariana was so engrossed in her new life that she barely found the opportunity to respond to occasional calls and messages from John. Once, when John called Ariana to wish her a happy new year, she even said hello to Alice. This should be the approach to life for mature people, and it's never too late to become mature. It can be a little painful in the beginning, but then it brings great happiness. Ariana won't let us lie about that. That's how Alice commented and was genuinely happy for her. Carlos, I'm sorry, but there are some people there. They say they're from the auditing company, demanding to see you, Carlos' secretary said. Strange, we weren't expecting any auditors. Invite them in, Carlos said. 3 solid-looking men walked into the bank director's office. It turned out that one of them even knew Carlos. We have been commissioned to conduct an audit of your organization, said one of the men. Who is the client? Carlos asked with concern. It's the authorized representative, John. He has every right to do it. We checked the documents before we entered into the contract, so we only have 3 days to go. Carlos was left puzzled, but he had no right to refuse these experts. After John's death from an accident, Carlos allowed that an heir would soon appear and there might be some hassle. On the 3rd day, the auditors finished their inspection and left. Carlos never got to see their report, but it didn't take long to get an answer. A couple of days later, the door of the director's office opened without knocking or warning. Carlos saw Alice in front of him. She greeted Carlos warmly, sat down on a chair, and carefully moved a stack of documents toward Carlos. Carlos, your late boss John and I trusted you like we trusted ourselves. And the audit revealed an obscenely large overspend, Alice said, pulled out a paper, wrote a 7-digit number on it, and placed the paper on top of the stack of documents. I'm ready to hear all your versions of how you're going to pay off that amount, Alice said and looked at Carlos carefully. As expected, the direct heir to John turned out to be Alice. She was now Carlos' de facto supervisor. The unexpected inspection took Carlos by surprise, and he had no time to do anything about it. As an option, I suggest you settle this within the law. But in that case, you'll have to go to jail, Carlos. Alice continued to remain unperturbed. Alice, give me time. I'll be sure to pay off all my debts. How can you do that? I've served this organization faithfully for so many years, and it's unfair to end up in jail, Carlos pleaded. All right, you've convinced me. We won't put you in jail. But you can't stay in this place any longer either. So I suggest you write your own resignation now. Well, my kindness doesn't end there. As an old friend, I can offer you a position as a security guard in this building. True, the income is not comparable, but you will have a chance to learn discipline, said Alice. Carlos had no choice but to write a letter of resignation. Of course, the offer to work as a security guard was a mockery on Alice's part. Carlos decided to give himself time to rest to decide on his future prospects. A few days later, he learned from former employees that Alice had appointed her brother Slava as the head of the bank. Carlos could not find words to comment on all this. What could he say? Alice, the full owner of the organization, as she decides, so she does. Only now Carlos realized that years ago he had vainly thought Alice was an uninteresting, characterless woman because she accepted all the rules of the game Carlos was playing. Now he realized that it was her personal decision. Her loyalty and ability to be honest was not a weakness, but actually turned out to be her strength.